We are going through the all-time list of Florida State players broken up by several different categories, and we just completed the offensive playmakers bracket. And discuss a little bit of that and preview our next bracket is Warchant.com managing editor Ira Schofel. Ira, how's the family holding up?
We're doing pretty good. How you doing, Gene?
We're all right. We're hunkered down here in the man cave, and there are worse places to be, so it's not bad. So one of the things we're able to do, since we're not able to cover sports for the time being, is to kind of reminisce a little bit and look back at this. Has been a fun exercise to go through this. And, you know, there wasn't a whole lot of drama, I got to say, in the first round of the offensive playmakers. It went exactly according to chalk. All the higher seeds advanced. I don't know if was there one? I think the Amp Lee, Dexter Carter had a little bit of drama. I think one of the two polls that we do, Twitter and Warchant, was one of them. He only won by 58-something%. So that was a little close. But, man, all the other ones were just a trouncing. And, you know, anything you look back, any thoughts on that first round in the offensive playmakers?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, to your point, I mean, I think some of them we knew would be lopsided. Even the players knew they would be lopsided. You know, we got comments on Twitter when we first put the brackets out. I think Snoop Minnis and, you know, a couple guys, you know, basically went on Twitter and conceded before the voting even started. They knew they didn't have much of a chance. But I was surprised. I mean, you know, a couple of them, like Greg Jones and Dalvin Cook, I kind of thought, I mean, obviously Dalvin Cook's a better college running back, was a much better player at Florida State. But Greg Jones did have the big hit against Dexter Reed. He's kind of a cult figure on the message boards. It was funny, even after we put up the poll, so not surprisingly, a thread went up on the message boards asking if anybody had the shirtless pic of Greg Jones back in the day, which was always a highlight from him in the summer. And so, you know, I just think it was, I thought there might be some more sentimentality for a few guys, but no, it was just about everyone was lopsided, except like the one you said, Dexter Carter and Amp Lee. And I thought for a while that might go Dexter Carter's way after some of the initial voting. But then Amp Lee kind of ran away with it. No pun intended.
I think the one that maybe surprised me that was so lopsided was Sammy Smith against Rashad Green. And I'm a big Rashad fan. I mean, I don't think there's been a more consistent player through his 4 seasons at Florida State. And every time Jameis needed a big play, Rashad was always there. Just looked no further than the national championship game. But, man, going back to time when I was in school, when Sammy Smith was here, I mean, Florida State had never had a guy like that. He was just an absolute beast. And, I mean, he was a difference maker during his time here. So I really thought that would be competitive. And I wonder some of that is the recency bias, just because, you know, obviously Rashad Green is so fresh in everybody's mind. And we all still, you know, remember that 2013 national championship, that game, that big catch to put them in position for the game-winning touchdown. Had he not been interfered with a play before, maybe he would have had the game-winning touchdown there. So,
yeah, I don't know if it was, you know, I don't know if it was recency bias. I mean, I do think that's part of it. But I also think it's just numbers. I mean, I think, you know, when you start doing these things, it's hard to kind of get past the numbers. And Rashad Green's numbers are crazy. I mean, he's just all over the Florida State record books. Part of it's because he was FSU's leading receiver every year he was in college. You know, he kind of was fortunate that way. When he came in, Florida State didn't have a lot of great receivers. So he was the guy from day one. And then just kind of by the end of it, he was a legitimate, you know, I wouldn't say he was an All-American, consensus All-American type, but he was one of the top receivers in college football really his last couple of years. So he has just such amazing numbers. Sammy Smith and a lot of those guys back in that era shared the ball or shared reps, and so they don't have the numbers. So I think that's probably part of it more than the recency bias. The one interesting thing to me that I think this whole exercise is kind of showed me is how educated in terms of historically, you know, the tribal council, our members are. You know, if you look at the Twitter polls, I mean, it's a strong recency bias. You can tell that clearly in the way some of these are so lopsided. But on the tribal council, our subscribers, our members seem to have a better historical knowledge. And like you said, have given some of these guys more respect than they've gotten on Twitter.
Before we move on and preview the next bracket, we're going to do one last thing. And the most flack that I've seen we've taken for our seeding continuously is to have Chris Winkie as the number 6 seed. And I've tried to kind of explain this the way, like, first, you got Ward, you got Jameis, 2 other Heisman Trophy winners. So I can see the argument's going to be, why didn't he be third? But look, here's my point to them. I go, Peter Warrick for all intents and purposes, should have won the Heisman Trophy that year, if not for the whole Dillard's nonsense that went on that year. And the fact that he probably was the most dynamic playmaker in Florida State football history. So then you go, okay, well, then maybe he should have been a 4 seed. Then you got Dalvin Cook sitting there. And if not for being on those 2015 and 16 teams, which were so bad across the board offensively, he maybe wins a Heisman, and he was easily the best running back in Florida State history. And think about the importance of the team. Where would those two teams be without Dalvin Cook? They would have been in big trouble. It would have been like that 17 team probably we saw without him too. So then you go, okay, 5th. Now I can see maybe him and Warwick Dunn. That was a tough one when I had to kind of be the tiebreaker there, and I was basically flipped a coin between those two being 5. Am I wrong, or are we just way out on a line making Chris Weinke a 6 seed?
I get it. I think when you see it on paper, when you see it on the bracket, it's like stuns you. I mean, and even when we did our ballots, and then you sent us back the results, it kind of stuns you a little bit to see it. But I agree with you. I mean, I agree with what we did. I stand by what we did. I mean, it's not to take anything away from Chris Weinke, but there are a lot of quarterbacks who could have put up those numbers on those offenses in 99 and 2000, really 98 through 2000. It's not to diminish him, but there's a lot of guys who could have done that. I don't know how many running backs could have had the yards Dalvin Cook had and the success Dalvin Cook had with that offensive line those 2 years and that quarterback play. I mean, it's amazing. And then he also dealt with a hamstring injury. He had the whole, off the field issue that he had to kind of compartmentalize and get past. He was found not guilty, but he did go on trial right before a season. So I think to me it's hard to put many people above him, but you have to go with the Heisman Trophy winners. And then Warwick Dunn, again, same thing. I mean, he was such a difference maker on a team in the early 90s where Florida State was the dynasty. They were as good as anybody's ever been in college football. Warwick Dunn didn't just come in and play as a freshman and sophomore. He was a difference maker. So again, I just think to the point you were making, it's not to say that Weinke wasn't a great college football player, but you feel like some other guys could have done what he did, whereas I don't know how replaceable guys like Dalvin and Peter Warwick and Warwick Dunn were.
I'll tell you one thing, if not for an injury, though, Ira, we might be talking a different story. He might be the number 1 overall seed. If he doesn't get hurt in 98, there's no doubt in my mind, and maybe Tennessee fans wouldn't admit it, but Florida State rolls to a national championship in 98 if he doesn't get hurt. So then you're talking back-to-back national championships and playing for a 3rd in his 3 seasons. That resume may be so much you would have to put up at number 1 or 2 at that point. But unfortunately, we'll never know how that would have played out because of that injury against Wake Forest. Now let's move on.
Hey, and ultimately, the fans are going to get to decide. As it goes on. I mean, he rolled in his first round. If he ends up winning the thing, then everybody can tell us how wrong we were.
Yeah, he matches up against Dalvin Cook. We're showing you the right now the brackets are being put up, and he plays Dalvin Cook in the next round. So if we're wrong, go ahead and show us. Vote for Weinke over Dalvin then. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, the big release here. Next bracket we're going to hit up for the next week or so is going to be the Legends / special teams. So the nice thing is each day we'll be able to have a Legends matchup and then also a special teams matchup. So this is some really interesting stuff here. We're showing you that bracket right now, Ira. And, Ron Simmons, number 1 overall seed for the Legends. Absolutely no surprise there for anybody who knows him. But there's some nice matchups here, man. One I'm looking forward to, Greg Allen versus Jamie Dukes. I don't know how I'm going to vote on that one. You got some Lee Corso against Ron Sellers. Some really neat ones there.
I'm also interested to see the votes on the tribal council. Of course, we have people, they can actually write, not just vote like you can on social media, but actually make your case for your for who you select. And we're giving out gift cards every day, a $25 gift card to eCard to Garnet and Gold. And I think it's cool to see different people give their rationale. It's going to be neat to see some of these old timers on our message boards. I can call people old timers because I'm up there as well. Some of their reasoning for their picks and telling stories about some of these guys that, a lot of people never got to see Lee Corso play, but I guarantee there's a lot of people on our message boards who did.
Oh, yeah, they've definitely seen him on game day, so they'll probably get some votes because of that. So, yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot you had to win your $25 e-card from Garnet Gold each day. And what's even unique about the special teams is we broke it in between the return specialist, or just specialist, I should say, and then the kicker / punter. So some really interesting matchups there. I mean, the one that jumps out to me there, Tamarick Vanover versus Willie Reed. And here's one. I'm going to be interested to see this one because to me, people talk about Dion and Peter Warwick, who we had to take out of this just because they're already in the playmakers category, so we didn't want to have them in there twice. But I mean, to me, if you go back, Willie Reed might have been the best returner in Florida State history. So I'm interested to see Mark Vanderman, one of the best kickoff returners in Florida State history, and then the other having Greg Reed against Joe Wessel too. That's going to be a lot of fun there as well. Those two guys going against each other, and then of course Janikowski and Roberto Aguayo make up the number 1 and 2 seeds for the kickers. So any thoughts about that special teams brackets, Ira?
Yeah, I mean, I think these are tougher. I think you know, when we were talking about this off the air, you said you think there might be some closer battles, and I think there definitely will, because you get some difference. They're not so cut and dry. I mean, like you said, Willie Reed versus Tamarick Vanover is interesting because Willie Reed has some great career numbers, and he was a really good punt returner, had some huge games in big moments. But Tamarick Vanover was dominant. I mean, he was as dominant a return guy as I remember. I go back to, I actually covered the Florida game that Spurrier kept kicking off to him. And you just sat there the whole game. He can't kick off to him again. And sure enough, he did. And Tamarick just kept going back. Just one of the most physically impressive guys. And then, like you said, Greg Reed and Joe Wessel, totally different positions as specialists. And then kickers, everybody talks about Florida State and wide right. But really, how many schools are going to have 4 better kickers than Florida State has on that list right there?
Oh, yeah. So that's the thing. It's amazing when you look at the kickers. It was feast or famine at Florida State. Either the best kicker in the country or it was a complete train wreck there. And even a guy like, Ron Stark, one of the greatest punters of all time, is in there. We probably could have put him in the legends bracket, but he was such a great kicker. We put him in there as well. So, yeah, really good matchup there. We're going to start that voting on Tuesday and then run that through next week. So get your votes in and get your make your case on the tribal council. There's several people that have been doing it, but a lot of people are just saying, oh, I want to vote for this guy or I don't like this guy. Man, give us your case, man. It's an easy way to win a Garnet and Gold e-card. And the nice thing is they are open right now for business to order online. So go ahead and load up on your FSU gear. Ira, appreciate it, man. Keep rolling out some great content. You got anything else to look forward to for Warchant subscribers the next few days?
Yeah, well, yesterday we put up that story on Travis Jay, which I think was an interesting story. He sat out last season because of academic issues. He's working at corner. He worked at corner this spring. He's going to be focusing on that in the preseason, and they have a lot of high hopes. I talked to Adam Fuller, FSU's defensive coordinator, about him, and he had a lot of interesting things to say. So that article's up on the site. And then also you will have, I think we're running today, one of your retrospective pieces at the 2003 Florida State signing class, which I think it's going to be an interesting read because that was right around the time that I really started working closely with the Warchant. So I'm eager to see that breakdown.
It's a bit depressing. I just finished up 04 as well. Looking back, I should not have done the starting at the beginning of the lost decade because, I mean, you can just it gets worse and worse, it seems like, every year. But I'm going to build up to those early Jimbo years when things bounce back. It's interesting, though, because you can go back in time and remember the lies you told to yourself about these players. Because the stories I look back at some of the stories I wrote back then. I'm like, oh, man, was I just tooting the company horn back then and blowing this class up? The problem is there was no way to know how quickly it was going to fall off a cliff. Yeah. And years later, and I'm sure we'll summarize this as we go through this, but I think it's interesting. Years later, I talked to John Lilly, who was FSU's recruiting coordinator back then. You worked with him closely, and he's now back in the ACC at North Carolina. And one day we were talking, this is years later, and he said, basically they got to a point where they realized they just couldn't get in the door with top recruits anymore. It wasn't a matter of Coach Bowden losing his ability to close when he got in the house. They couldn't get in the house anymore with the top recruits. And that was kind of around the time we're talking about. They did get the Ernie Sims and Antonio Cromartie's local guys. But when it came to the top recruits nationally, that was around the time that they just couldn't get in the door anymore. Yeah, it's an interesting story. So, yeah, you have that to look forward to, as well as a lot of other features. And I know coming up for Corey's series, we'll have FSU in the Final Four coming up later this week. So that will be interesting to see if they can pull it out and get to the finals or not. So stay tuned to that. All right, Ira, appreciate it. You stay safe. You and your family, everyone else out there listening, stay safe, stay at home, and we'll talk to you soon.